well-known doctor showed up at a Louisiana plantation on May 14, 1845, to deliver what he believed to be the grandchild of another affluent planter. Instead, he discovered a barely 20-year-old woman who was expecting her fourth kid in 5 years, each of whom was fathered by a different slave chosen by her own father. She wasn't by herself. Confined to different rooms in the same wing of the mansion, her two sisters were in the same situation. The colonel showed the doctor something that chilled him to the bone when he requested an explanation. 3 generations of controlled breeding are recorded in leather-bound ledgers. In-depth genealogical records and anthropometric measurements made with calipers and rulers showed how his own family's lineages gradually blended with those of his slaves. It was dubbed his life's work by the colonel. His girls were said to as patriots. He referred to their offspring as the South's future. The doctor's realization that the colonel's daughters were not his biological children at all, however, was the most upsetting discovery. Decades before, his father had conducted the same experiments that produced them. Prior to moving on to the tale of what Samuel Harrington found at Bellevue Plantation, hit the notification bell and subscribe to our channel if you're interested in the most sinister truths concealed in American history. Additionally, let us know in the comments which state you are currently listening from. We read each and every one. One individual would have to decide between revealing the truth and preserving his own life due to the atrocities at Bellevue Plantation. In New Orleans, Dr. Samuel Harrington had established a solid reputation by caring for both the affluent French quarter merchants and the immigration refugees swarming the ports. At 42, he had made innumerable deliveries, placed shattered bones in back alleys, and tended to yellow fever patients during the 1841 outbreak. He had witnessed murder, brutality, and poverty in ways that would shatter weaker men. Above all, however, he saw himself as a man of reason and science. He also quietly supported the American Anti-Slavery Society, although he kept this a secret. During his training as a physician, he had been to precisely 2 sessions in Philadelphia. Both times he sat in the back and left before anyone could have a memorable chat with him. A medical practice in New Orleans might be destroyed overnight or worse by such associations. Therefore, he kept his thoughts to himself, showed the same consideration for the slaves of wealthy families as he did for their owners, and reminded himself that even a modest act of kindness was preferable to none at all. The letter, which arrived on May 12th, was written on pricey paper in a beautiful style. Bellevue Plantation's Colonel Thaddeus Crane asked him to come right away because of a challenging delivery. The charge was unusual, 3 times his typical rate, and the tone conveyed a sense of urgency and complete secrecy. The name of the Crane was familiar to Harrington. Although Thaddeus was an Englishman who had married into the old Louisiana money family 30 years earlier, the family claimed ancestry dating back to the first French settlers. Located 40 miles upriver from New Orleans, Bellevue Plantation was only reachable by boat or a full day of horseback riding over roads that converted to swamp when it rained a lot. Harrington selected a small paddle steamer that delivered supplies to the river plantations on weekly runs. He studied a medical journal for the majority of the 6-hour drive, while attempting to block out the intense humidity that caused his shirt to stick to his skin. The other travelers were a mixture of overseers, merchants, and a Methodist preacher who read his Bible the whole way, and periodically gave Harrington the skeptical glance that devout men usually saved for doctors. In the South, the relationship between medicine and faith has long been tense. Bellevue appeared as the boat turned a bend in the river. Constructed in the Federal style, the main house was 3 floors high and had white columns that glistened in the late afternoon sunlight. Spanish moss-draped live trees formed a tunnel of green shadow along the approach from the river. Harrington could see the usual rows of slave houses behind the main house, maybe 40 or 50 total, and beyond them, the unending sugarcane fields that stood in for the wealth of the plantation. A young man, maybe 20 years old, dressed nicely in neat clothes that identified him as a house servant, was a slave who was waiting at the pier. Without saying a word, he took Harrington's suitcase and walked him along the road, lined with shells, to the mansion. The silence was instantly apparent to the doctor. He found that plantations were rarely quiet. Voices from the fields, the sound of labor and overseers' cries ought to have been audible. Instead, all he could hear was the distant cries of an unidentified bird and the buzz of insects. Before they got there, the front door opened. Despite the heat, a Caucasian woman, possibly 50 years old, stood in the doorway wearing black silk. Her look was stiff and controlled, as if she had learned long ago to conceal her true emotions. "I'm Constance Crane, the Colonel's wife, Dr. Harrington. I appreciate your prompt arrival." She had the gentle accent of old New Orleans families in her speech. She didn't extend a hand. "My husband is in his study waiting for you. After that, I'll have someone show you to your room. I hope your trip wasn't too demanding." The politeness seemed practiced, enacted as tradition required but lacking in sincerity. Harrington's years of working with the rich had taught him to read such things. Something was frightening this woman. "It was all right, Mrs. Crane." A challenging delivery was mentioned in the letter. Something passed over her face too quickly to be recognized. "My spouse will tell you all about it." She led him through a large entry hall that was lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men and women. "If you will follow me." Names and dates are inscribed on little brass plaques that are attached to each portrait. The Crane family has a long history. The house had an underlying perfume that he couldn't quite identify, but it smelt like beeswax and ancient wood, something therapeutic, maybe some other tincture like eldenum. The whole east corner of the house was taken up by Colonel Thaddeus Crane's study. 2 walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling bookcases filled with leather-bound books. In the middle of the room was a huge desk. Papers, strangely scientific-looking devices, and 3 leather ledges stacked exactly one on top of the other covered the surface. A slim, erect guy with silver hair combed back from a high forehead sat behind the desk. He looked to be in his early 60s. There was something instantly unnerving about the intensity of his pale blue, somewhat colorless eyes as they stared at Harrington. "You sit down, Dr. Harrington." Although years in Louisiana had softened some of the edges, the Colonel's voice still possessed the clear consonants of educated English. He pointed to a chair that was standing right across from him. "Thank you for responding to my letter so quickly. Your medical knowledge and complete secrecy are needed for what I'm going to tell you. As a gentleman, I need your assurance that nothing mentioned in this room will be repeated to anyone outside of this property before we move forward." The first icy thread of worry ran through Harrington. "I swear as a doctor to keep patient information private, Colonel Crane. I can't guarantee silence, though, if what you're going to tell me could hurt someone." The Colonel grinned, but it wasn't a happy one. "Doctor, harm is such a subjective phrase. What some may consider damage, others may see advancement. Others may refer to what some..." Hands clasped behind his back, he stood and moved to the window. "What do you know about heredity, Dr. Harrington? Are characteristics passed down from parents to children?" "I am aware of what every knowledgeable doctor is aware of. It seems that some traits run in families: height, eye color, and exact susceptibility to specific diseases. And if these characteristics are observable and recordable, may they not also be managed, chosen for, improved by meticulous preparation?" The Colonel faced him once more. "My family has been doing a selective breeding experiment on humans for the past 50 years. Not with horses or cattle, Doctor." Despite the heat, the room seemed to get colder. Harrington's stomach constricted. "I'm not sure I get what you're saying." "Oh, I believe you fully comprehend." The Colonel went back to open the first ledger on his desk. Harrington could see pages of diagrams, what looked like family trees, and squished handwriting even from across the desk. "This work was started by my father in 1795. He studied under the natural philosophers and was a man of science, and he developed an obsession with a straightforward query. Could superior workers be produced by combining the knowledge and refinement of white blood with the best qualities of African slaves, such as their physical strength and endurance? Not only slaves, Doctor, but a new class of people being. They were fiercely devoted to the family that produced them, more intelligent than any pure African and stronger than any white man." Harrington's lips were parched. "Colonel, that's not medication. Isn't that an abomination?" The white eyes of the Colonel shone brightly. "Dogs are bred for particular qualities. To increase yields, we crossbreed crops. In what way might human improvement differ? My father's early experiments took 30 years. He chose slave women according to certain standards, including as height, facial symmetry, and the absence of obvious scarring or deformity. After that, he fathered children with these ladies and chronicled each stage of their growth. Monthly physical measurements are done. These ledgers contain evaluations on temperament and cognitive abilities." He used one finger to tap the books on his desk. "Doctor, the results were astounding. The progeny displayed hybrid vigor. Indeed, they were superior to both parent races in terms of strength, intelligence, and capability. However, my father found something more that he had not expected. The most successful pairings were produced by breeding the daughters of those unions with carefully chosen partners in the second and third generations, not by crossings in the first generation. Harrington rose suddenly. I refuse to participate in this nonsense. I came here to give birth, not to take part in a twisted experiment. Doctor, have a seat. The voice of the colonel became icy. I paid you to come here, so you did. After hearing what I have to say, you will carry out your responsibilities as a doctor. Otherwise, you won't survive your stay at Bellevue Plantation. Do I express myself clearly? The two men looked at one another for a long time. Harrington felt the pounding of his heart against his ribs. He considered the boat that had already taken him upriver. He considered the 40 miles of plantation and swamp territory that separated him from New Orleans. He reflected on the total seclusion of this location and the quiet he had observed upon his arrival. He sat down again slowly, a smart move. The colonel's voice became a little softer, like a lecturer speaking to a class of students. As I explained, my father's work produced some amazing outcomes, but he made a crucial mistake. He regarded his test participants as slaves and property. This led to animosity, escape attempts, and even one instance of infanticide as the act of a mother killing her own child, instead of raising it in slavery. I inherited my father's plantation and research after his death in 1823. The second ledger he opened. I studied his notes, his mistakes, and his triumphs for 5 years. And I came to see that the methodology, not the science, was the issue. In order to participate in the experiment, the ladies had to be willing, or at least think they were. They had to view their offspring as legitimate heirs rather than as the result of rape. I therefore came up with an alternative strategy. To make the ledger visible to Harrington, the colonel flipped it around. The page displayed a thorough family tree with branches linking names and meticulously noting dates, physical attributes, and a label that said, cognitive rating. I had to set up a scenario in which well-bred white ladies would voluntarily have children with specific slaves. The answer was simple but elegant. In total seclusion from the outer world, I would raise kids, my own daughters. Yes, I would educate them, but I would also instill in them the belief that their holy mission, their noblest purpose, responsibility, was to produce resilient offspring for the plantation's future. I would have complete influence over their thoughts, beliefs, and every part of their lives, until it would be impossible for them to refuse. Bile rose up in Harrington's throat. You're referring to your own kids? No, physician. The colonel smiled back. I am referring to the children of my father. My father's experiments produced the 3 young ladies who are now in the East Wing. My part has only involved carrying on the task, raising them in a fatherly manner, and assisting them in achieving their goals. They refer to me as father. They think I'm their dad. However, they are actually my half-sisters, the daughters my father had in the last years of his life. Like a physical wave, the implication swept over Harrington. Your own half-sisters are being bred by you. I'm still doing important research, the colonel clarified. Additionally, the outcomes have beyond my most hopeful expectations. My daughters have given birth to 11 children in the last 5 years. There are 9 survivors. Everyone is being raised with careful attention, which is recorded by the doctor at every developmental stage. They are amazing. They are smarter than any slave child I have ever met, and they are stronger than any white youngster. They pick up languages quickly. They are talented artists. Every single one of them is stunning. Them. His stern, pale eyes were riveted on Harrington as he closed the book. But above all, they belong to me. I was reared on this plantation by my daughters, who have never known anything else. They are utterly devoted. When the oldest reaches adulthood in 10 years, I will have people who are capable of reading, writing, math, and skilled labor, but who will never question their role in society. They won't cost anything to obtain, but they will be worth more than any pure slave. Doctor, are you aware of the financial ramifications? What are the societal ramifications? I realize you've given me a nightmare, Harrington replied, his voice trembling. Despite having your own blood, you have ensnared 3 women in a cycle of forced pregnancies, creating offspring who will grow up as slaves. My father's blood, not mine, the colonel remarked acerbically. Furthermore, they are not slaves. When they reach adulthood, they will be released and given documents and even a little amount of money. They will be able to work as skilled laborers throughout the South because they are free people of color. Some may even be able to blend in with society at a degree that is unattainable for regular emancipated slaves, since they may even pass for white. Harrington was starting to realize how big the horror was. You intend to put them in different homes, companies, and families. I intend to establish a network, the colonel uttered quietly. My techniques have already sparked curiosity from other planters. My 3 light-skinned granddaughters have already been adopted into well-known families in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Adopted charity cases from distant cousins, raised as orphaned relatives. Nobody is suspicious. There might be hundreds like them in the South in 20 years, in positions of authority and trust, yet ultimately devoted to their creators. The room seems to be tilting, Harrington thought. You're telling me this, but why? Why have you brought me here? As my oldest daughter's prior deliveries have become more challenging, and she is currently in her 8th month of pregnancy, I require a qualified doctor to guarantee the survival of the mother and kid. You have some great suggestions, Dr. Harrington. And you're from New Orleans, which is so far away that you don't know any locals and have no one to confide in. He leaned forward, the colonel. This child will be delivered by you. You will take care of my daughter's health and keep what you have learned here to yourself. I'll pay you well, and let you go back to your New Orleans practice in return. And you won't leave Bellevue at all if I say no. In a few weeks, your body will be found. One more sad visitor lost their life in one of the numerous accidents that occur in the swamps of Louisiana. Sad but not unusual. Are we in agreement? Between them, there was stillness. Harrington could see the river turning to gold as the sun started to drop outside through the study window. A lovely evening in hell, finally he said. Take me to the patient. The colonel stood with a look of delight. Dr. Harrington, I knew you were a sensible man. You will be shown to the East Wing by Mrs. Crane. I'll be right over to introduce myself. Harrington's thoughts were racing as he followed Constance Crane through the halls of the estate. He needed to get out of this situation. He had to reveal what was taking place here. He had to make it out of the plantation alive first, though. Furthermore, he needed to verify whether the colonel's heinous accusations were accurate. The truth was somehow worse than he had thought, as evidenced by what he discovered on the East Wing. It was possible to characterize the East Wing of Bellevue Plantation as a medicalized prison. The hallway's bleached walls and uniformly spaced doors gave it a pristine, nearly sterile appearance. There was a small window at eye level in each entrance which was curtained off from the inside. In addition to the scent of lavender water, Harrington detected a clinical scent that brought to mind the charity hospital in New Orleans. At the first door, Constance's Crane came to a standstill. She reached for the doorknob, her hand trembling slightly. Silently, she murmured, "This is Eliza. Her age is 22. Her 4th child will be this one." "You know what's going on here," Harrington said. There was no question. The older woman clenched her jaw. "I understand that I am the colonel's wife and that it is my responsibility to run his home. I am conscious that I have serious concerns about certain areas of my husband's employment, and I understand that saying such things out loud would only act to complicitize me in ways I am not already complicit in." She looked him in the eye. "Doctor, I do all I can. I make sure the girls are at ease. I give them music, books, and whatever other tiny comforts that are feasible given the limitations of their circumstance. It is something, but not much." She opened the door before Harrington had a chance to reply. The room beyond was bigger than he had anticipated, maybe 20 feet square, with towering windows that let in the last of the sunlight and a high ceiling. It was tastefully decorated with a writing desk, bookshelves brimming with volumes, a sitting area with padded seats, and a spacious 4-poster bed with crisp sheets. Watercolor paintings of flowers and rural landscapes adorned the walls. It could have been a nice guest room in any affluent home if not for the bars on the windows, which were scarcely visible under lace curtains. House. One of the chairs was occupied by a young woman, who rested her hands on her noticeable belly swell. When they got inside, she looked up and Harrington's breath caught in his throat. There was something almost unearthly about her beauty. She had honey-colored complexion, darker than any white woman but lighter than any slave he had ever seen. Her features were symmetrical and delicate, with huge brown eyes that conveyed a cautious intelligence and high cheekbones. Her thick, wavy hair was pulled back in a straightforward style that highlighted her neck's graceful line, and she was obviously afraid. The young woman stood slowly, moving with the deliberate deliberateness of a very pregnant woman. "Eliza," Constance began softly, "this is Dr. Harrington. He has come from New Orleans to help with the delivery." "Doctor, good evening. I'm sorry I didn't get up sooner. Today the infant has been very active." She spoke with the deliberate pronunciation of someone who had studied speech patterns in literature. Harrington was able to speak. "Please do not trouble yourself. May I ask how you are feeling?" "Tired," she responded with a smile. In a matter-of-fact manner, as if talking about the weather, Mother Constance told me, "The last delivery was difficult. I bled more than I should have. Father worries that this time may be even harder." The older woman left and Harrington repeated, "You mean Colonel Crane, Father?" "Of course, who else would I mean?" Constance cleared her throat. "Doctor, maybe you should examine the patient. I will leave you to your work. Eliza, if you need anything, ring the bell and someone will come immediately." Stood in awkward quiet. "You may examine me, Doctor," Eliza replied. "I am accustomed to it." Professional detachment had always been his strength as a doctor, but this circumstance went against every presumption he had based his profession around. "You are the third person I have met." She went to the bed and fell back, putting her dress modestly. Harrington came over with his medical bag and took out his stethoscope. Papa has doctors come by on a regular basis to record the pregnancies. The baby's heartbeat was strong and regular, and the position felt good, head down and engaged, but Eliza's pulse was elevated, and he could feel tension in her abdomen that suggested extreme stress. "The baby seems healthy," he said carefully, listening to the baby's heartbeat and checking her blood pressure and pulse. He struggled to find words that would not break her world or make him complicit in the horror. "Your heartbeat is quick. Are you getting enough sleep? The baby moves all night long and I worry about what will happen after the delivery. But overall, I sleep as well as can be expected," she added. "The other children are taken away after 6 weeks and the father says that they must be raised together to form proper bonds. I understand the reasoning, but it is hard to give them up after carrying them for 9 months." "What do you mean?" she asked him with those dark, perceptive eyes. "The first pregnancy ended at 5 months, and the father said that first pregnancies often fail. The second delivery produced a healthy son who will be 3 years old soon. I am not allowed to see him, but Mother Constance assures me that he is healthy and that he is smart and strong." "You have already given up 3 children. 3 living?" she corrected. "The third and fourth were daughters, and they are 1 and 2 years old. This will be my 5th child. 5 pregnancies in 5 years. A flash of emotion appeared on her face but was quickly smothered. "Miss Eliza, pardon my directness, but do you understand the circumstances of these pregnancies? Do you understand who the fathers are?" Harrington asked. "Of course I understand, Doctor. Father explained everything to us when we reached maturity. We are part of a great work, an experiment that will change the future of the South. The men chosen as fathers are chosen for their physical strength and perfection. Our children will combine the best of both races, creating a new category of human being that will ensure the stability of the social order and the prosperity of our family." "And you believe this?" "We are not slaves, Doctor. We are participants in something greater than ourselves. Our children will be set free when they grow up. Father has brought us up with love and care. He has taught us far more than most women receive. You accept this?" "Why would I not?" She appeared truly perplexed. The colonel had not only forced his half-sisters into this nightmare, but he had conditioned them to accept it, even embrace it as their highest purpose. "Miss Eliza," he said slowly, "has anyone ever told you that you have a choice in this matter? They will have opportunities that neither pure white nor pure black children could ever have." Harrington realized with increasing horror that the brainwashing was complete, and she genuinely believed everything she was saying. "That you could turn it down?" Something like fear flashed across her face for the first time. "Refuse? Why would I say no? How would I respond? Where would I go? Father has given us everything. This home, this education, this purpose, and without him we would be nothing," she said, raising her voice a little. "We would have nothing." Colonel Crane came in without waiting for permission and he said, "Dr. Harrington, I trust you find the patient in good health." Harrington straightened, forcing his face to remain neutral. "The baby is well positioned, but Miss Eliza shows signs of significant stress. Her previous deliveries have weakened her. Another pregnancy so soon after the last could be dangerous. I should like to examine your other daughters as well," Harrington said, "but the breeding schedule cannot be interrupted. Once this child is delivered and she is sufficiently recovered, she will be paired with the next selected male. We have a timetable to maintain." Eliza remained silent, merely rearranged her dress and went back to her sitting position as if this exchange were nothing out of the ordinary. The colonel led him out of Eliza's room and down the hallway to a locked door at the far end. and he took a key out of his pocket and opened it, revealing a staircase leading down. Of course, Mother Constance will show you to their rooms. But first, Doctor, I think you should see the results of our work. I want you to understand exactly what we are creating here. He explained that the nursery is in the basement, climate-controlled as much as possible in this heat away from the main living areas to avoid any disturbance. The children need a lot of care and supervision. The basement had been transformed into a series of interconnected rooms, each painted white and furnished with toys, educational materials, and small beds. In the main room, 9 children, ages 1 to maybe 4, were doing various activities while being watched over by 2 slave women. However, it was the children themselves that stopped Harrington cold. They were all stunning, unsettlingly so, and each one displayed the same meticulous blending of features that distinguished Eliza: the honey-cold skin, the delicate bone structure, the Colonel's voice was full of pride. This is what I have created. Superior specimens in every measurable way, stronger than white children, more intelligent than slave children, and absolutely controllable because they know nothing else. The older children were reading from primers far advanced for their apparent ages. A 3-year-old girl was working through arithmetic problems on a small chalkboard, and a 2-year-old boy was building complex structures with wooden blocks, his small hands moving with remarkable dexterity. A girl who was maybe 4 years old came up to them and gave them a flawless curtsy. "Good evening, grandfather. Have you come to test us?" "No, not today, sweetheart. I'm showing the doctor how far we've gone." "Have you finished your lessons?" "Yes, grandfather." The girl curtsied again and went back to the other kids. Her movements were elegant, controlled, and completely childless. "They call you grandfather," Harrington said. "They are my grandchildren, doctor." I finished the 2nd-level reader and practiced my handwriting for an hour. "Mistress Clara says my letters are getting better." "Excellent, you can go back to your play. They will be raised to understand their place in the world. Neither wholly white nor wholly black, but something new, something better." Harrington watched the children playing, their laughter sounding almost normal except for the controlled, measured quality of it. They were being raised as specimens, as experiments, as products. Even their joy was managed and documented. They don't need to understand the complexities of that relationship yet. When they are older, they will be told their mothers were distant relatives who died in childbirth. He asked softly, and the Colonel grinned. There are currently 5, including Bellevue, but the number is increasing annually. Word gets around in particular circles that the future of the South depends not only on preserving the current social order, but also on enhancing it, on establishing a permanent underclass that is superior to the current slaves, but still submissive to their masters. And on the 3 children who have been placed in white families thus far, all girls, the lightest skinned of the crop, and those who can pass for white with only the smallest inquiries, their children will be lighter, even more acceptable. In 3 generations, Doctor, I will have managed to infiltrate the entire Gulf Coast aristocracy. The extent of it was astounding. Harrington felt as if he were plunging into a chasm. They are being raised as orphaned relatives in prominent families in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Natchez. When they grow up, they will marry well, bringing our carefully cultivated bloodlines into the highest levels of society. The Colonel clarified, "You intend to destroy the social order you claim to be protecting. I plan to preserve it. Slavery as it exists now cannot endure forever, as abolitionists gain strength each year, and war may even break out. While I hope we can avoid such extremes, what will happen when slavery ends, as it inevitably must? How do we maintain?" He gestured to the playing children, saying, "These children will never rebel. They will never seek to rise above their station. They have been designed, Doctor, from conception to birth. We create a new category of human beings, free in name, but bound by upbringing and circumstance to serve the families that created them. Grateful for their position, incapable of imagining any other life." Harrington closed his eyes, fighting the nausea rising in his throat. The Colonel's plan was monstrous, but it was also frighteningly plausible. If this work continued, if other planters adopted the same methods, it could indeed reshape Southern society in ways that would last for generations. Adulthood to be perfect servants, perfect workers. And because they will be legally free, there will be no moral objection to their status. The North will have nothing to protest. The Colonel studied him for a long moment, those pale eyes searching for any sign of weakness or defiance, and then he nodded. "Very well. But keep in mind, Dr. Harrington, that you are here as a physician, not as a judge, and that your main responsibility is to ensure safe deliveries and healthy children. The analysis of the other two daughters showed the same pattern. Caroline, 20, had given birth to 2 children and was now 4 months pregnant with her third. She displayed the same meticulous conditioning as Eliza, the same unwavering belief in the righteousness of her father's work. The youngest daughter, Margaret, was 18 and pregnant for the first time. She was more anxious than her sisters, asking questions about the delivery process with a heartbreaking innocence. She had been taught that bearing children for her father's experiments was her sacred duty, but she was still afraid of the pain and risk. Harrington found himself automatically offering reassurances, then hating himself for providing comfort that might make her more compliant. And the same underlying terror, carefully hidden but visible to Harrington's trained eye in the tension around her mouth, the way her hands occasionally trembled before she controlled them, after examining all 3 women. Constance Crane led him to a guest room on the 2nd floor, far from the east wing, which was comfortable with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the darkened fields. He pointed out that the window was not barred, and that he was not a prisoner but rather a guest who knew better than to leave. A slave girl brought him dinner, but she refused to look into his eyes, set the tray down, curtsied, and walked away without saying anything. The food was delicious. Harrington hardly tasted the plantation fare of roasted chicken, rice, and vegetables. His thoughts kept going back to the 9 kids in the basement, playing under supervision, their whole lives laid out in front of them. He thought about his options. He could try to flee tonight, make his way to the river through the fields, or try to flag down a passing boat, but the colonel would have expected that possibility. There would be overseers watching, maybe even dogs, and even if he managed to return, he needed the ledgers, the ones the colonel had shown him in the study, documenting 3 generations of forced breeding. With those books, he could prove everything. Medical details, names, dates, and genealogical charts that would expose not just the colonel, but every planter involved in the conspiracy. New Orleans, who would believe him? Without proof, without documents, it would be his word against that of a respected plantation owner. The question was how to obtain them. A gentle knock cut through his thoughts. When Harrington answered the door, he saw Constance Crane standing in the hallway with a candle in her hand, and he wondered whether the colonel had decided to deal with him in advance.
"May I come in, Doctor?"
"There's something you should know," she muttered. He moved aside and she hurried in, shutting the door behind her. She appeared older than she had been during the day, with the creases around her mouth and eyes accentuated by shade, and Harrington surmised that this was due to years of carefully managed horror. "Mrs., you've come to ask me to remain quiet about what's going on here, Crane," she interrupted. "I've come to help you expose it." Her hands were shaking, but she spoke steadily. "Dr. Harrington, I've been a coward for 20 years. I have told myself that there was nothing I could do, and that I would only end up destroyed if I spoke up. I've concealed behind the pretext of giving those girls minor consolation, as if that somehow made up for the massive evil being done. But now that you're here and have witnessed everything, I can't keep quiet any longer." For the first time since coming to Bellevue, Harrington sensed optimism beginning to grow. "What would you suggest?" "Duplicate copies of my husband's ledgers are stored in a safe in his study. It would be too costly to risk the original documents being destroyed in a fire. Everything is in the duplicates. The breeding logs, the financial papers demonstrating the sale and placement of children, genealogy charts, and even correspondence with other planters." Then she produced a little key from her pocket. "The safe is opened as a result. I am aware of the location. When my husband has gone to bed, I can let you into the study." "What are you doing?" "I know what my husband can do if he finds out about your participation," she added softly. "But I also know that I can't stand this stillness any longer. I'm called mother by those girls. They have faith in me, and I have violated that faith each and every day by letting this go on." Harrington took the key. 2 hours after midnight, he puts Lord Am to bed. "I'll unlock the study door and continue to keep an eye on the corridor. You'll have maybe 20 minutes before the rest of the household wakes up. I'll attempt to get you to copy the most critical documents during that time." She nodded and moved to go, but she paused at the door. "Dr. Harrington, you should know something else," she said. "I was married to his father, so I know the truth. The girls are not his half-sisters, that's what he tells himself, what he's written in those ledgers. Harrington was hit hard by the realization that the colonel was not carrying on his father's work. He had created the entire nightmare himself, then created a complex fiction to make it seem like inherited obligation rather than his own monstrous design. "My God," he whispered, "those girls are products of the colonel's own experiments. Children he produced with slave women in his youth. He calls them his father's daughters to justify what he does to them, but they are his own children, his daughters, and he has been breeding them since they were 15 years old. There are only monsters and their victims in this house," Constant declared. "There is no God. At 2 I'll see you." Harrington lay on his bed, fully clothed, watching the shadows move across the ceiling as moonlight filtered through the window. The next few hours passed painfully slowly, and every sound, footsteps in the hallway, the settling creak of old wood, the distant call of an owl outside, made his heart race. 10 minutes before 2 o'clock, he got up and got his medical bag, which held paper and pencils for taking notes on patients. The ledgers would be too big to steal in their entirety, but he could copy the most damning entries, the names and dates that would prove the conspiracy. The hallway was dark, save for a single candle burning in a wall sconce near the stairs. Harrington walked carefully toward the study, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet runner. Constance had promised to unlock the door, but as he got closer, he noticed it was already slightly jarred, a sliver of darkness beyond. He pushed it open slowly. His hands were shaking as he felt his way to the desk, searching for the ledges that had been stacked there earlier, but they were gone. Panic flooded through him. Had the colonel moved them? Hidden them somewhere else? He fumbled across the desk surface, feeling papers, instruments, and an inkwell, but no leather-bound books. The study was completely dark, with the heavy curtains drawn over the windows. He had brought no light because he was afraid it might be seen from outside. A match flared, and Colonel Crane lit an oil lamp on the side table, revealing him sitting in a leather chair with the 3 ledgers stacked on his lap and a pistol resting on the chair's arm. "My wife has many admirable qualities," the colonel said calmly, "but deception has never been one of them. She has been agitated all evening, jumping at shadows, unable to meet my eyes, and when she claimed to have a headache and retired early, I knew something was amiss." Harrington's mouth had dried up. "Where is Mrs. Crane?"
Locked in her chambers, unharmed.
"I do not hurt my wife, doctor. I am not a savage, but I cannot allow her misguided conscience to interfere with my life's work." He put the ledgers aside and raised the pistol, but he did not aim it at Harrington, the most logical target. So I decided to wait and see if my suspicions were correct. You are ruining the lives of your own children, establishing a system of slavery that will last for generations. The question now is what to do with you. I had hoped that we could come to a professional understanding. You would give medical care, I would pay you generously, and we would part as gentlemen. However, it appears that you are determined to make this difficult. You cannot expect me to remain silent about what is happening here," Harrington said. "And you, doctor, are about to become a footnote in that work, a regrettable casualty of your own self-righteousness," the colonel retorted, "while I am ensuring the survival of a way of life." The door flew open and one of the overseers, a big man with a scarred face, walked in before Harrington could react. "Colonel, there's trouble. One of the girls is in labor. The eldest one. Eliza, how long has she been in labor?" "I don't know, sir. The slave woman just came running. She says it started suddenly, maybe an hour ago." The colonel's controlled facade briefly broke, revealing something that might have been genuine concern. "She's bleeding bad." The colonel stood instantly, the pistol left on the chair. They hurried to the east wing, where they found chaos. Eliza lying on her bed, her face gray with pain, blood soaking through the sheets beneath her. 2 slave women hovering nearby, pressing cloths against her legs to try to stop the bleeding. Mother Constance there, her face pale but her hand steady as she held Eliza's hand, and Harrington's medical training taking over. "Dr. Harrington, your services are needed. We will continue our conversation later." "Placent abruption," he said tersely. "The placenta has separated from the uterine wall." The baby's head was crowning, but something was wrong. The bleeding was too heavy, coming too quickly. He pushed past the colonel and started his examination, his fingers searching for the source of the hemorrhage. "If I don't birth this baby right away, they will both perish." The current crisis was all that was present for the following 20 minutes. Harrington clamped and cut the cord, cleared the airways, and guided the baby's head with urgent efficiency. The boy baby came out bluish and quiet. The crowd erupted in a breathless yell as he cleaned his mouth and patted his small chest. However, Eliza's bleeding persisted. Harrington used every method he knew to apply pressure, pack the uterus, and use ergot to contract the muscles. Gradually, painfully, the bleeding stopped. Eliza was asleep but breathing when he eventually took a step back, and his hands and forearms were covered in blood. The colonel whispered, "She will live. Perhaps the next day will reveal. Her blood loss is substantial. It was highly likely that she would die from another pregnancy." Noted. One of the slave women had wrapped the baby in a fresh cloth, and the colonel scooped it up. He inspected the infant with the same clinical objectivity that he could use to check a newborn with a robust heartbeat. Now it's good color, appears to be in good health in spite of the difficult birth. Harrington's tiredness gave way to anger. His mother was almost killed by the child. Because you pressured your daughter to have 5 pregnancies in 5 years. She almost died. The colonel maintained, however, that she did not die. Another successful specimen has recently been obtained. As it must, doctor, the work goes on. Harrington made his choice then, as he observed the colonel holding the baby with such icy judgment. He was not going to abandon this plantation without anything. Even if it meant losing his life, he would expose this tragedy. "I must remain with her," he said. "Keep an eye on her condition all night. I'll have to operate if the bleeding starts up again." The colonel gave a nod. "Naturally, I'll arrange for someone to bring you clean sheets and fresh water." And he stopped at the door, "Doctor. Do not believe that our relationship has changed as a result of this situation. Tomorrow we will conclude our talk." Harrington sat next to Eliza's bed after the colonel left, keeping an eye on her breathing and pulse. Constance was still there too, sitting in the corner with a miserable mask on her face. Harrington could hear Eliza's weak breathing and the distant cry of the newborn from another room in the silence, created by the dismissal of the slave women. "I apologize," Constance muttered. "I created everything. Worse, you made an effort to assist," Harrington remarked. "It requires bravery. 20 years ago, courage would have been acting. Refusing to take part in this from the start would have shown courage." She gazed at the unconscious body of Eliza. "She won't be able to live without him, will she? He will keep exploiting her until her body completely fails, even if she makes it through this." Harrington was at a loss for words. The reality was too grim to be spoken out loud. Eliza awakened as the sky outside started to light up with the first signs of dawn. Her bewildered, unfocused eyes opened. "The baby," she said in a whisper. Harrington informed her the boy was healthy. "Although your delivery was challenging, you will get better." Her face flashed with something. He was unable to read the expression.
"When will I be able to have another child?"
He almost crumbled when the question was asked with such resignation. "You can't have any more children, Miss Eliza. It is too much for your body to handle. Your next pregnancy will be fatal." She averted her gaze. "After that, I had failed my father's job. I am no longer useful." "You're a human being," answered Harrington hurriedly. "Your worth extends beyond your capacity to procreate. You may go now. You could go wherever you wanted to and live the life you wanted." For the first time, he noticed something other than flawless obedience in her eyes when she turned to face him. "I don't have any money. No talents other than what my father taught me, and no family other than the one he built. Where would I go, doctor, even if I could leave? What would I? I'm neither black nor white. This is the only place I belong." Her body had not just been imprisoned by the colonel. Her imagination, her sense of possibilities, and her capacity to envision life outside Bellevue had all been imprisoned by him. There was a tense standoff for 3 days. The bleeding ceased, Eliza's health stabilized, and she gradually regained her strength. Harrington supposedly stayed at the plantation to keep an eye on her recuperation, but in reality, since the colonel explicitly stated that he would not be allowed to depart unless specific assurances were given, Harrington witnessed the entire extent of the operation throughout those days. Every day, the 9 kids in the basement received teachings that blended traditional education with ongoing brainwashing about their role in the world and their destiny. In addition to being educated to read, write, and calculate, they were also trained to be obedient, appreciative, and to accept any duty that their grandfather gave them. Margaret and Carolyn, the 2 younger girls, were taken to see Eliza, discussions that were closely monitored by the colonel. In upbeat tones, they talked about their own pregnancies, the significance of their work, and how fortunate they were to be a part of something so important. However, Harrington saw that Caroline's hands were constantly moving, tugging at her dress and stroking her hair, as if her body was attempting to communicate the fear that her words were unable to conceal. The colonel called him back to the study on the third evening. This time, the pistol was nowhere to be found and the ledgers were locked away. On the desk instead were 2 glasses and a bottle of fine brandy. "Doctor, have a seat. I believe that we need to talk openly about your future at this moment. Talk openly about your future at this moment." Harrington did not move. "Colonel, I won't keep your secrets. It is imperative that you cease your heinous actions here. And just how are you going to put a stop to it?" The colonel pushed 1 glass across the desk and filled the other with brandy. "You don't have any proof. My ledgers are still with me. Who would believe you if you brought crazy stories of breeding experiments back to New Orleans? I'm a well-known landowner. You are a doctor with well-known abolitionist views who will say anything to undermine the system of slavery. The kids are there, handwritten proof of your actions. The children are the descendants of my daughters and other slaves, and they are my grandchildren. It's tragic, but not quite illegal. Many plantation owners use slave women to father their offspring. Society ignores it. My daughters will attest that they have voluntarily joined these unions and that they have received fair treatment and compensation. Doctor, what crime can you prove?" Harrington felt the weight of the truth descend upon him like a crushing burden. Well, the colonel was correct. It would be hard to prove anything other than the widespread exploitation that took place on plantations across the South, without the ledgers and documentation of the multi-generational conspiracy. "But I am not an unreasonable man," the colonel went on. "I appreciate the skills you possess. You preserved years of meticulous breeding by saving Eliza's life. As a permanent physician, I am willing to give you a position on this plantation and in the network of facilities that are part of our program. You would be paid well. You would be involved in something that will change Southern civilization and have access to cases that would greatly enhance medical knowledge. You want me to join you in your criminal activities? I want you to have common sense. There is slavery, doctor. No matter what the abolitionists say, it will remain in place for the foreseeable future. All I'm doing is attempting to make the system more effective and compassionate for the unavoidable future. By joining us, you can contribute to ensuring that the procedure is carried out under medical supervision and that the mothers and children receive the best care possible, given the program's limitations." They both realized it was a devil's deal. If Harrington agreed, he would be wealthy, comfortable, and able to offer the victims a few token favors. If he didn't, he would be assassinated, buried in the swamps, and a doctor more willing to make moral concessions would take his place. "I need time to consider," Harrington finally stated. The colonel stood, signaling the end of the discussion, and said, "You have until tomorrow evening. Give me your answer then. You are allowed to roam around the plantation in the interim. Talk to anybody you want. Maybe a more thorough comprehension of our work will enable you to make the best choice." Harrington remained awake that night, searching for an unattainable solution. With evidence, he was unable to flee. Without evidence, he was unable to reveal the scheme. Furthermore, he couldn't accept the colonel's offer without compromising his moral convictions. The source of the solution was surprising. He was awakened shortly after midnight by a gentle scratching at his door. When he opened it, he saw Clara, an elderly slave woman from the nursery who rarely spoke but always had a profound intelligence in her eyes. "Doctor," she muttered hastily, "you must accompany me." She took him out through the kitchen and across the dark grounds toward a little structure he had not previously noticed, partially concealed by live oaks covered with Spanish moss. "There is something you must see," she said, avoiding the east wing and the basement nursery. He recognized the old, overgrown, and deserted cemetery as they got closer. He followed Clara to the back corner, where a row of tiny headstones marked graves that were only 3 feet long, after she forced open the rusting iron gate. She knelt next to one and pulled weeds, exposing an inscription. Crane died in April 1834 at the age of 3 months. The words, "There are 17 buried here," were spoken softly by Clara. He referred to them as failures, errors in the breeding program that needed to be fixed. Babies born in the first years of the colonel's work. Babies with defects or the wrong color skin or behavioral problems that suggested they would not be controllable. His blood turned to ice, Harrington felt. He murdered his own grandchildren. "Doctor, not all of them passed away naturally. A few were suffocated while they slept. Some received medication that caused their hearts to stop beating. I was there, so I know. I have counted each and every one of them, and I assisted in their burial." She took a little book out of her apron. covering its pages with meticulous scribbling. In the past 15 years, I have documented every birth, every death, and every child that has come through this area. I have listed all of the names, dates, and descriptions that the Colonel keeps in his ledgers here. Why are you displaying this to me? Because you were the first person to arrive at this plantation, witnessing the events and being appalled by them. Because I've been waiting for someone who could perhaps halt this for 15 years. Furthermore, if you accept his offer tomorrow and join this system, none of us would have any hope left. She put the book in his grasp. Take this. Give it to a helpful person, someone who will accept your story. What happens to me doesn't matter to me. I've already lived too long with these secrets, and I'm an elderly woman. However, the kids in the basement and the girls upstairs deserve a chance at a different life. Harrington glanced down at the little book he was holding. It was proof, actual written proof that may support his claims. If the bodies of slain infants could be exuded and analyzed, the graves were proof. How can I survive on this plantation? Every Thursday, a boat arrives to supply supplies. It's Thursday tomorrow. At sunrise, the boat docks, unloads for 2 hours, and then proceeds upriver. You might make it to the pier before the Colonel notices you're gone if you can persuade the captain to take you. He'll be aware that I talked to you. You will be punished by him. When Clara smiled, it was a horrible look. I've been a slave for 63 years, Doctor. Things that would shatter most people have not broken me. Before I die, let me accomplish one kind deed. Let me assist you in stopping this. Harrington headed for the river dock early the following morning, when the sky was just starting to lighten. Only his medical bag and Clara's book, which was tucked away in an inside pocket, were with him. Slaves had not yet been summoned to the fields, and the plantation was still. It's still dark in the overseer's shack. A simple paddle wheeler with peeling paint and a captain who appeared to have worked the river for 40 years was the supply boat, which was already there. Harrington hurried over, his heart racing. I had to get to New Orleans right away. I'll give you whatever you want. The captain examined him from head to toe, seeing his unkempt appearance and the desperate tone of his voice. Are you fleeing from something? I work as a doctor. I was recruited to go to a challenging birth. I'm being detained here now against my will. I have to return to the city, please. Tobacco juice was spat over the rail by the skipper. On the river, that plantation is not well known. There, strange things occur. People enter and remain within. I'll take you for $5 in cash, but I don't want any trouble or ask questions. Without hesitation, Harrington took out his wallet and made the payment. As he boarded, he glanced back at the plantation house with its white columns shining in the morning light. 3 young women were waking up to another day of incarceration somewhere in that lovely, awful place. And 9 children were the awful place. The boat pulled away from the dock, its paddle wheel churning the brown water of the Mississippi. Harrington gave himself a moment of relief. He had escaped, he had evidence, and now he needed to find someone who would listen, someone who would take action. Little did he know that his escape had already been discovered, and that the Colonel's reach stretched far beyond the boundaries of Bellevue Plantation. He was starting obedience lessons, and a colonel was meticulously recording his monstrous work. Harrington had time to read Clara's book thoroughly during the 6-hour boat ride back to New Orleans. But what he discovered was worse than he had anticipated. The names and dates revealed a systematic infanticide program that lasted over 10 years, with babies born with darker skin than desired, babies who cried excessively, babies who appeared too stubborn, and infants who didn't live up to the Colonel's high standards. All of them dead before their first birthday, their graves buried in that overgrown cemetery. A state senator from Baton Rouge, a federal judge from New Orleans, a banker who controlled half the region's credit, plantation owners from Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and others had visited Bellevue to discuss the Colonel's methods. Clara had documented more than just deaths. The conspiracy was even more extensive than the Colonel had indicated. When the boat finally docked in New Orleans, Harrington went directly to the office of the district attorney, a man named James Whitfield, who had a reputation for honesty. However, when he asked for an urgent meeting, he was informed that Whitfield was unavailable, out of the city on business, and not expected back. For a week, Harrington tried the police in frustration. The chief of police listened to his story with a growing skepticism, then demanded to see his evidence. When Harrington produced Clara's book, the chief shook his head and flipped through it. This is a slave's journal. It would not be admissible in any court in Louisiana. Slaves cannot testify against white men, Doctor. You must know that. However, the cemeteries are on private land. To search Bellevue Plantation, I would require a warrant, and no judge will provide one based on abolitionist doctor's charges and slave notes. The chief pushed the book back across the desk and closed it. I would advise you to overlook this, Dr. Harrington. You don't want to turn Colonel Crane against you. A man Harrington had never seen before walked in without knocking as the chief's office door opened. Maybe 50 years old, he was flawless, wore the self-assured demeanor of someone used to authority. Please pardon us, Chief, but I need to speak with Dr. Harrington privately. Without delay, the chief stood up and gathered his papers. Judge Cartwright, of course. You have the office, Judge Cartwright. Clara Ura has the name in her novel. Bellevue was visited in June 1843 and September 1844. Harrington's tummy dropped. Judge Cartwright sat in his chair and steepled his fingers after the chief had departed, examining Harrington with icy eyes. Doctor, you've caused a lot of trouble. This morning, Colonel Crane reported that his doctor had stolen something. Naturally, he is really worried. There are several killings on the land in question. Records, the judge cut in. Because it was written by a slave, it has no legal value. More importantly, though, Doctor, you are interfering with issues that are not your concern. Colonel Crane's affair is what he and his family do on his own land. The law makes this quite plain. There is no legal justification for infanticide. According to the law, a man is free to discipline his property any way he pleases. It is unfortunate but not illegal for slave children to perish while working on a plantation. The magistrate bent forward. But I'm not here to argue with you about the law. I'm here to provide you with a decision. You can go back to practicing medicine, put Bellevue behind you, and lead a long, successful life. You can also carry on with this cause, in which case I'll make sure you face charges of trespassing, theft, and slander. Your medical license will be revoked. No one in this city will help you, so you will be destroyed socially and financially and still achieve nothing. You have contributed to the Colonel's program, so you are involved. Harrington remarked softly. The judge grinned and said, I have 2 beautiful nieces staying with me, orphaned relatives from a branch of the family that fell on hard times. They are handsome, well-educated, and charming girls. In a few years, they will make excellent marriages, bringing fresh blood into the old families of New Orleans. No one questions their presence in my home. No one ever will. And if I go to the newspapers, if I make this public, then you will be dismissed as a madman. Your story will not be printed, your name will be destroyed, and you will discover that accidents can happen to people who cause problems for powerful men. The judge said, Go home. Dr. Harrington, the newspapers in this city are owned by men who share the Colonel's vision for the future of the South. Attend to your patients. Don't think about Bellevue. I heartily suggest it. Harrington sat in the vacant office after the judge left, feeling the walls enclose him as he held Clara's book. All roads were closed. All authorities were either helpless or complicit. The plot was too intricate and well-defended. He pictured Eliza recuperating from a near-fatal delivery and already knowing when she would get pregnant once more. He considered how the 9 kids in the basement had come to terms with their lot in life. The 17 graves in the overgrown cemetery sprang to mind. A way has to exist. Someone had to be willing to listen. As he made his way back to his apartments in the French Quarter, he realized the answer. The abolitionists? These were the same individuals he had been reluctant to publicly connect with for fear that they would ruin his practice. The only people who might act without considering the societal repercussions were them. Harrington went to the New Orleans Anti-Slavery Society's covert gathering that evening, in the back of a Chartres Street bookshop. The tiny room was packed with 30 individuals. Despite their diverse backgrounds, men and women were united in their resistance to slavery. He filled them in on everything. The forced pregnancies, the killings of infants, the breeding scheme, and the plot by judges and planters. He held up Clara's book to them. He provided them with dates and names. There was a long pause when he was done. At last, a Boston-accented elderly man spoke. We must disseminate this information to the national organization and the journalists, since it is unlike anything we have ever dealt with. It will take weeks to plan that kind of campaign. One woman said that by then the Colonel will have destroyed all evidence, moved the children, and silenced the witnesses. Then we move faster. Harrington said we raid the plantation, rescue the women and children, and take the ledgers by force if necessary. This could be the scandal that finally shifts public opinion against slavery as an institution in New York and Philadelphia. The argument went on for hours, with some arguing for legal action for working within the system. That is illegal. It is vigilantism. It could get people killed. People are already being killed. Harrington's voice rose. Children are being murdered. Women are being raped by their own father. How much worse does it have to get before we act? In the end, a compromise was reached. A small group would go to Bellevue, try to rescue the women, and gather evidence while sending documentation to abolitionist newspapers in the North. Harrington was chosen to lead the rescue effort because he was familiar with the plantation's layout, the location of the East Wing, and the overseer's schedule. Marcus, a freed slave with experience transporting people along the Underground Railroad, would help, along with six other people. The colonel's reach was long, and Judge Cartwright had resources all over the city. So even though Harrington was unaware of it at the time, he had the uneasy feeling that he was being watched as he made his way back to his rooms that night. Shadows appeared to move in the darkened doorways, and footsteps reverberated behind him on the cobblestone streets. 2 nights later, a group of 8 men gathered at the riverbank, 3 miles south of Bellevue Plantation. The plan was straightforward: approach through the fields, enter through the kitchen, which Clara Ara had promised to leave unlocked, proceed to the East Wing, and remove the 3 women before the overseers could react. Harrington had a different goal. While the others concentrated on the rescue, he would go to the study and take the ledgers. With the women and the documentary evidence, they would have everything needed to expose the conspiracy. They had traveled separately, avoiding the main roads, and met at the designated location shortly after midnight. Marcus, who appeared to be able to navigate in total darkness, led them through the sugarcane fields in single file. The plantation house loomed ahead, with most of its windows dark except for a few lights on the ground floor. Harrington experienced a sudden intense uneasiness as they approached the kitchen door. It was too quiet. No dogs were barking, no watchmen were calling. It felt like they were walking into a trap. The door was unlocked as promised, and they filed inside. They divided into 2 groups, with Harrington and 2 friends heading toward the study and Marcus and 4 others heading toward the East Wing. The hallways were quiet, with the sound of footsteps muffled by carpet runners, and the study door was closed but not locked. Harrington pushed it open slowly, anticipating darkness. Water trickled from their clothes after wing through the irrigation ditches. The kitchen was dark and deserted. Everything was going well so far. Lamps were lit instead, and Colonel Crane sat behind his desk just as he had 3 nights earlier, with the ledgers piled in front of him. "Good evening, Dr. Harrington. I have been waiting for you." Before Harrington could respond, armed men appeared out of the darkness. 4 overseers, each with a rifle, blocked all the exits, and the 2 men with Harrington were apprehended right away, disarmed, and brought to their knees. "Did you really think I would not expect this? Judge Cartwright warned me that you had contacted the abolitionists," the colonel inquired gently. "Ever since you got back to New Orleans, we've had folks keeping an eye on you. From the start, your shoddy scheme has been obvious." "The others are where?" Harrington insisted. "How did you treat them?" "In the East Wing. Your buddies are being held captive. They'll be with you soon. No one has been hurt, but that could change based on how eager you are to cooperate." The colonel got up and circled the desk. "Doctor, you've made me do it. I had hoped that you would see reason, and we could come to an accord. Rather, you have decided to endanger everything I have created. You can't murder us all. Questions will be raised by the absence of 8 people. An illegal raid on a private plantation was attempted by 8 abolitionists, who were apprehended and killed when they refused to be taken into custody. I promise that no questions will be asked, Doctor. The local government has enough of money to ignore it. After a week, nobody will be able to recall your identities, and your bodies will be buried in the swamps." The remainder of Harrington's crew was marched in at gunpoint when the door opened. Marcus had been hit in the head, and blood was streaming down his face. The others appeared frightened but unhurt. "So before we wrap up this unpleasant affair," the colonel added, "I have a question. How did you obtain the book written by the slave woman? According to Clara Ara, she doesn't know how it got out of her hands." Harrington said, "I took it. My flight had nothing to do with her. Do not disparage my intelligence, Doctor. For years, Clara has been problematic. She records details and watches everything. Her journal has been known to me for a while. I believed a slave's testimony was worthless, so I let her keep it because I found it funny. Anyway, she has already violated my confidence, and there must be repercussions." He gave one of the overseers a nod. "Bring the elderly woman." Clara was pulled into the study a few minutes later. Her clothes were ripped and her face was battered, but as she gazed at the colonel, her eyes were clear and defiant. The colonel told her, "You have been a thorn in my side for 15 years. With your self-righteous silence, you have chronicled my labor, condemned me, and passed judgment on me. Did you think your tiny book would change anything? I believe Clara stated unequivocally that you are a monster, who will burn in hell for what you have done. Did you think anyone would be interested in what an elderly slave had to say? And whether I live to see it or not, I believe that everything you have created will be destroyed by the truth about this place one day." The colonel delivered a savage hit to her face, causing her to collapse to the ground. "I say that the truth is what it is. In actuality, I have established a structure that will transform the South and guarantee our prosperity for many years to come. Your book, your viewpoint, your testimony is meaningless." He looked at the supervisors. "Go to the old tobacco barn with them all. Keep them indoors. Burn it to the ground at morning. Make it appear as though the fire began by accident while they were sheltering there. The burned bodies of abolitionists who perished while trying to carry out their raid are visible to everyone who looks into it." Something unexpected occurred when the overseers started to herd the inmates toward the door. Eliza showed up in the entrance to the research. With one hand resting on the doorframe for support, she wore a nightgown, her face still pallid from the recent birth. "Father," she muttered. The colonel turned, seeming surprised. "Please stop. You ought to be sleeping, Eliza. Go back to your room right away." "No." She spoke steadily yet softly. "All of it has been listened to. What these men came to do, I heard. I've heard your plans to harm them. And after 22 years of refusing to understand, I finally get it." Taking her time but determinedly, she entered the room. "You informed us that we were involved in excellent work. You said we were exceptional, blessed, and selected. You assured us that our kids would live in freedom and prosperity. But Father, wasn't that all lies? We are not your daughters. You have us as prisoners. Your grandchildren aren't our kids. You own them. And just as you disposed of the babies who didn't live up to your expectations, you will do the same to us when we are exhausted and our bodies are unable to produce children. You're sick, Eliza. You're not thinking straight. Go back to your room, and after you're well, we'll talk about this. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly." She looked over at Harrington. "I thought you were crazy, Doctor, when you told me I could go and live a different life. However, you were correct. I'm free to go. I have a choice. And I've decided to be honest about what has transpired here." To the colonel's expression turned white with anger. "You're not thankful. Father, I'm not ungrateful. I'm conscious." Eliza's voice became louder. "Margaret and Caroline are also awake. Since the delivery, the three of us have been conversing. Despite being told to forget, we have been recalling things. We have been challenging the things we were taught to believe. Furthermore, we now realize that we were never daughters.